A man lies dead in a wooden bath. His arm hangs over the edge, draped downward with the specific boneless weight of a body that has stopped. His face is turned to one side, calm, not the calm of sleep, but the deeper stillness that comes after. In his right hand, a quill pen. In his left, a letter. On a small wooden crate beside the bath, an inkwell, some papers, and a knife. Light enters from the upper left in a long diagonal, falling across the figure with a quality that painters call raking. It travels parallel to the surface, catching every small relief of fold and skin, then disappearing into shadow so complete that the lower third of the painting is almost pure black. It is one of the most beautiful things in Western art. It is also, in the most precise and technical sense of the word, a lie. The painting is called The Death of Marat. It was made by the French painter Jacques-Louis David in 1793, weeks after the murder of Jean-Paul Marat, in his medicinal bath on the 13th of July of that year. David was not only the most celebrated painter in France, he was, at the time he painted this, a sitting member of the Committee of General Security, one of the governing bodies of the revolution, and a close ally of Robespierre. He was the official artist of the terror. He had visited Marat in his bath 2 days before the murder. He knew exactly what he was changing when he made his compositional decisions, and what he was changing in almost every particular was the truth. Who Marat actually was. Jean-Paul Marat was a journalist, a physician, and one of the most radical voices of the French Revolution. He published a newspaper called L'Ami du Peuple, the friend of the people, in which he argued with escalating intensity across the early years of the revolution that the enemies of the people needed to be destroyed in order for the people to be free. The enemies were defined broadly and expanded regularly. Marat called in print for the deaths of thousands of people. At different moments, his published estimates of the number of executions required to secure the revolution ranged from 500 to 200,000. He was not speaking in abstractions. He meant it. And in 1793, as the terror consumed the Republic, people were dying at roughly the rate he had prescribed. He was also ill. He had developed, likely during a period spent hiding in the sewers of Paris while fleeing his enemies, a debilitating skin condition that caused open lesions across his body and could only be temporarily relieved by soaking in a medicinal bath. He spent much of his time in this bath, writing, receiving visitors, conducting the revolutionary business that had made him one of the most feared men in France. Contemporaries who saw him in his last years described a figure whose physical appearance was deeply unsettling. The skin, the smell, the evidence of a body in the process of destroying itself. David painted none of this. The man in the painting has perfect, unblemished skin. His face is serene and unmarked. His arm hangs with the graceful weight of a classical sculpture. He looks like a young man who fell asleep and did not wake up. He looks with the deliberateness that is too precise to be accidental, like Christ being taken down from the cross. The angle of the body, the hanging arm, the wooden crate positioned like a tombstone at the edge of the bath. David took one of the most controversial, physically damaged and bloodthirsty men in France and painted him as a secular martyr of classical perfection. Charlotte Corday. Now look for the woman who committed this murder. She is not there. Charlotte Corday was 24 years old, a Norman noblewoman with Girondin sympathies, who had traveled to Paris specifically to kill Marat. The Girondins were a moderate Republican faction that Marat had been systematically destroying in print, calling for their arrest, their execution, their elimination from the political life of France. Corday believed, with the clarity of someone who had thought through the logic of the situation, that Marat was going to keep ordering deaths until someone stopped him. She bought a knife in the Palais Royal on the morning of July 13th, 1793. She wrote him a letter asking for an audience. She was refused entrance at his door twice and talked her way in on the third attempt. She spent approximately 15 minutes with him, long enough for him to take notes on the names she gave him of Girondin enemies in Caen. Then she stabbed him once in the chest. She did not attempt to flee. She waited. She was arrested in the room. At her trial, she did not deny what she had done or attempt to mitigate it. She said she had killed one man to save 100,000. She was guillotined 4 days after the murder on July 17th, 1793. She was calm at the execution. Witnesses reported that the executioner held up her severed head and slapped it, and that the face appeared to blush. David knew who Charlotte Corday was. He knew she had been there. He knew the letter in Marat's left hand was from her. She had written it that morning requesting the meeting, and it was still in his hand when he was found. He painted the letter. He did not paint her. He removed her from the scene entirely, not through compositional complexity, but but through the simplest possible choice. He excluded her, and in doing so, excluded the most important fact about the scene he was depicting. The painting shows a murder victim with no murderer, an act of political violence with the political agent erased. It converts a killing that Corday clearly considered justified, that many historians since have treated with at least complicated ambivalence, into a simple image of martyrdom, with the martyr passive and perfect, and the question of why anyone would want to kill him completely absent. What David removed. Run the list of what David changed or excluded from the scene he was depicting. He removed Marat's skin condition, the lesions, the deteriorating surface of a man who had been soaking his illness for months. He removed Marat's actual physiognomy, which contemporaries described as irregular and at times frightening. He removed the smell, which is not something a painting can include, but which David chose not to acknowledge in any way. No detail that would suggest the medicinal necessity of the bath, nothing that would remind the viewer that the man in it was in chronic pain. He removed the political context of Marat's work, the calls for mass executions, the lists of names, the newspaper that had been demanding deaths for years. He removed Charlotte Corday from the scene she had created. And he removed the knife that killed Marat from the bath, where it had fallen after the stabbing, and placed it on the crate beside the body, where it sits as a clean prop rather than as evidence. Every removal was a choice. Every choice served the same argument. This was an innocent man, at work for the people, murdered by the enemies of the people, for no reason that deserves to be shown. The political machine. To understand why David was capable of this, and why it worked, you need to understand what painting was in France in 1793. David was not simply an artist. He had organized the great revolutionary festivals of 1790 and 1791, spectacles involving tens of thousands of participants, designed to give the revolution a visual and ceremonial language. He had sat on the committee that abolished the Royal Academy and replaced it with a new revolutionary artistic institution. He had voted, as a member of the National Convention, for the execution of Louis XVI. He was a political actor of considerable power, and he understood the relationship between images and political authority in a way that very few people in history have combined with the technical ability to exploit it. The death of Marat was exhibited within months of the murder, hung at the Place de la Réunion, and then in the convention itself. People wept in front of it. Marat, who had been a controversial and genuinely frightening figure during his lifetime, feared even by many who shared his political views, was transformed by this image into a beloved martyr. Prints of the painting circulated across France. The image of the dead man in the bath became the visual grammar of a particular political moment. David had not recorded history. He had manufactured it in real time for a government that needed it manufactured. The letter in his hand. Now look at the letter in Marat's left hand. The words are legible. She has written that she is unhappy and that she asks for his goodness. David gives her this, a victim appealing to her murderer's charity. He uses the letter Corday actually wrote, which she wrote to gain access to a man she planned to kill, as evidence of his innocence and her deception. The letter is the most audacious element of the composition. It is real. It was really in Marat's hand, and David uses it to invert the moral logic of the scene entirely. Corday wrote to gain access. David uses the writing to suggest vulnerability. The document is the same document. The meaning David assigns it is the opposite of what it was. When you understand this, you understand what kind of painting you are looking at. Not a document, not a record, a construction. One in which every real element has been incorporated in the service of an argument, and every element that would complicate the argument has been removed. What the painting is, here is the thesis I keep arriving at. The Death of Marat is the most technically perfect propaganda image in the history of Western art, and it is perfect specifically because it does not look like propaganda. It looks like grief. It looks like evidence. It looks like the direct, unmediated recording of something terrible that happened, the way a photograph looks, or the way a police report reads. It has the visual grammar of documentary and the content of a political manifesto, and the combination is so skillfully constructed that 200 years of viewers have stood in front of it and been moved without fully understanding what they were being moved by. This is also a tribute to David's technical genius, because the painting is genuinely beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with its political function. The light is extraordinary. The composition is extraordinary. The depiction of the dead arm, the way it falls, the specific quality of that particular weight, is one of the finest passages of painting of the entire 18th century. The work earned its canonical status on technical grounds that have nothing to do with its subject or its lies. What I find most striking is the letter, not the words on it, though those are, once you know their history, devastating in their cynicism, but the fact that Marat is still holding it. He took her letter, he was working from it, taking notes, when she killed him. The quill is still in his other hand. He did not see it coming. He was in his bath, in pain, doing his work, making his lists, right up until the last second. David painted that. He painted the caught mid-work quality of the death, the inkwell, the papers, the pen, with complete fidelity. It is the one thing in the image that is entirely and unedited true. A man working until the moment he was stopped. Whether you find that pitiable or simply accurate depends entirely on what you know about the work he was doing. I'd love to know what you think. Before today, did you know that Charlotte Corday believed she was saving lives? And does knowing she has been erased from this image change how you look at the letter in Marat's hand? Let me know in the comments. I'd really love to hear your reading.